People, what's the creepiest encounter you've had with a complete stranger that still gives you chills? Story 1. I was pregnant with my first child in 2001. Right before my due date, I was obviously really pregnant. I was shopping in Walmart, and I started to notice this woman on every aisle I went on. I would guess she was in her mid-30s. When I went to the baby section to look at clothes, she started asking me questions. At first, they were common, like about the gender. Then the questions started getting strange. Was I married? Did we have a house or an apartment? She commented on my accent and was curious if we had anyone in the area. I am from Michigan and was stationed in Florida, visiting for the birth. Just kind of odd. I was young, 20, but I was married, and my husband and I were both active duty, living off base in a rental house. I just told her yes, we were excited, and to have a good rest of her day. She then started actually following me, telling me her husband was outside the store and they could help me take my groceries to my house. That's when I got really nervous. I told her I was fine, thanks, that my husband was home and could help me. She then told me they had a big truck and that she would buy me a large baby item. I politely declined, and she was so insistent. Becoming aggressive, she then offered to buy my husband a grill since we didn't need any baby things. I was getting panicky at this point because I knew this lady was not right. I went to checkout, so did she. She got out before me, and I watched her race walk out of the store, and sure enough, she and her husband were pulled along the curb at the front near the pop machines. They were in a beat-up old yellow box truck. Her husband rolled down the window and said, "We'd be happy to help you with that." I again declined and went to my car. Loaded up and watched for a minute. They didn't move, just watched me. As soon as I pulled out, they did too. I left quickly, and they were only behind me for a minute or two. I still drove around crying for about 30 minutes, making sure they were gone, before I had to pee and needed to go home. I'm now 44, and that is the first, and one of just a few, times that I have felt that level of fear in my life. Story 2. When I lived in a rental property on the west side of Albuquerque many years ago, I had a census taker knock on my door. Okay, fine. I guess someone needs to do it. He asked me how many people lived in the home, how long I had been there, etc. Then he asked for my social security number as well as my wife's. No. I don't give my SMRs to anyone except the IRS. He said, "It's the law. You have to provide me with it." I said, "No, I absolutely do not. Now please leave." "I'll be back tomorrow." Sure enough, he showed up the next day, banging on my door and yelling from outside, "I know you're home. I know you're in there. I'll be back tomorrow." He came back a third day, knocking on the door, and I yelled through it, "I'm calling the police. You need to leave." Sure enough, the police showed up 15 minutes later. He was still standing there with his clipboard. The police took his ID, ran it, and came back 10 minutes later. "Sir, there is no record of you working for the local census. You will need to vacate the premises." Absolutely bizarre experience. Story 3. Pretty sure my dog saved me from a dangerous encounter. I was very pregnant and was leaving the grocery store with my cart. Lexi was waiting for me in the car. She loved the car rides when the weather was good. So I was loading up the groceries and realized that a man I had seen sitting in a car before I went into the store was still there and was watching me. He got out of his car and asked if I needed assistance, which I get. It was the polite thing to do, but something about it immediately put me on alert. I was completely unnerved by him and still can't state exactly what it was. I said, "No thanks, I've got it." But he continued to get out of his vehicle and walk toward my car. Lexi had been snuggled up on the front seat and must have sensed something from my voice. The man continued walking my direction, claiming he just wanted to help. I kept saying, "No, I don't need help. No worries." As the man approached the hatch of my vehicle where I was loading the groceries, Lexi sprang up from the front seat, leapt over the back seat, and jumped to the cargo area, growling and baring her teeth. It was dark and she was an all-black dog, so she seemingly appeared from nowhere. That was the only thing that made the man back up and leave. He started cursing at me, calling me names for not accepting his help, and for letting my dog threaten him. I will say, thank goodness it was dark, because Lexi was a cardigan Welsh corgi that was all black and looked far less intimidating in the daylight. She looked like a black lab puppy, but had super short, stumpy little legs. She stayed right by my ankles the rest of the night once we were home and wouldn't let me out of her sight. Story 4. I used to work at Meyer in the deli. A customer came up and asked for my opinion. I recommended all the things I liked and was just super friendly, I guess. He ended up calling the store that night asking for me. The other girl I was working with didn't even offer the phone to me. Just told him I had left, thank God. He came back the next day and started asking me personal questions. I was very vague, and then started helping other customers. He left, came back the next day. I had to get management involved. He was standing behind a pole just watching me. I had to be walked to my car every night for about a month. I would call my boyfriend at the time, now my husband, every night on the way home. And I lived in an apartment building with another co-worker whose husband would literally walk me to my door. Ugh, I still feel like he's watching me sometimes. And this was about 4 years ago. Story 5. Doesn't really give me chills, but it was quite creepy. I was leaving a club with my friend and happened to walk out at the same time as two very, very drunk young women. They were so drunk, one of them kept saying, "Where is my phone? I've lost my phone," until she realized it was half wedged into her top. They started talking to us, and I decided to make sure they got home safe. They didn't want to pay for an Uber and wanted to walk home. Despite not being able to walk or operate their phones, I insisted they order it and did it for them. I also decided to wait to order mine because they were extremely vulnerable and unwise. Probably recently 18. While this is happening, a very sketchy-looking dude with a weird look in his eye comes up to us. He asks if we want to go to an after party and mentions his Uber is on the way. I politely refused for all of us, and he kind of hung around, looking at the girls and then toward the club entrance. His Uber, a van-style people carrier with a sliding door, pulled up. He opened the door and said nothing to the driver. He suggested we come to the party again. He waited for an uncomfortable amount of time and realized we weren't going to come. He closed the Uber door without saying anything to the driver, and the Uber drove off. He then made his way back up to the club. He had been in the club that night and probably followed the women out. But unfortunately for him, fortunately for them, they got talking to me. Story 6. I was the designated driver for the night. I had dropped my friends off outside this venue so they didn't have to walk far since they were already a little drunk for some concert to club event, but then had to go find parking as the area was just packed. Took a couple laps, etc. Ended up parking around 5 blocks away. I came across this woman who was upset and seemed a bit confused, but she was very attractive and around mid-20s. Like myself, first thought was, "Oh, cool, she's talking to me." Realized within 15 seconds she was extremely intoxicated. She had just left some bar, was going to meet her friends after, her phone had died, etc. But she was rambling and I had to keep getting her back on topic. I ended up finally getting the number of a trusted male friend out of her. I explained that I couldn't just leave her like this. She was in a terrible state. Anyway, long story short, he said he could come but would be about an hour. While I was waiting, the same kind of thing happened. A couple of guys came over and said we should come party with them. Really close by, it'll be fun. I declined. I didn't know them, didn't even know this girl, and just wanted her to be picked up safely and taken home. They kept pushing and even suggested maybe just she should come. They were making me extremely uncomfortable, and I raised my voice enough for others to hear that I was annoyed and told them, "Neither of us are going with you." I couldn't have taken them physically, but this is a really busy bar street in my town, and there were people everywhere on a Saturday night. They eventually left. Her guy friend showed up, loaded her into the taxi, said thanks, and she presumably got home safe. I'm 95% sure someone had drugged her and was following her. Story 7. In July of 2006, I, now 44F, was attacked while jogging on a bike path that bordered a large university campus in the Midwest. I was just nearing the end of a 5-mile run when it happened. The path had looped around a wooded area and lake in an oval shape. I had seen the guy at the beginning of my jog, but thought nothing of it. So I can only conclude that he had waited in the adjacent woods for me to loop back around. After he attacked me and threw me to the ground, he attempted to suffocate me and move me up into the wooded area. After a very short period of time, by sheer good fortune, another man came along the path and pulled the guy off me. My attacker fled. The police were immediately called, and he was later apprehended. The attacker was convicted of kidnapping for forcibly moving my body against my will, and attempted assault, and he served 3.5 years in prison out of an 8-year sentence. He had prior convictions for armed robbery and assault. Story 8. I was a registered massage therapist for 7 years and had just opened my own practice. I was renting space at a clinic, and there were other practitioners who would often cross-refer clients for other services. One of the ND's clients asked her for my work schedule because he wanted to book a massage. This happened to be the same man who would stare at me from the waiting area in a way that made me have to close my office door. After receiving my contact details, he called me directly while I was at home with my partner and began asking me questions like if I were single, if I had a husband, and when I worked alone, because that's when he would prefer to come for his appointment. This automatically gave me bad vibes, so I told him I was never alone. Not true, and that I was actually booking quite far out in my calendar, so he'd be better off booking elsewhere. I thought this had deterred him. However, the next time he was at the clinic, he booked in with me via the receptionist. He came into my treatment room while I was doing notes, shut the door behind him, and demanded I write my hours down on one of my business cards so he could cross-check them in person with those of the clinic. I told him I was in the middle of notes, and if he was really that interested in knowing my schedule, he could look at my website. He then told me he had scheduled an appointment with me for the following week, and that he was so excited. He was giddy when saying this, and I started to freeze. I got up from my desk to walk him toward the door, but instead he stepped closer and tried to kiss me. He told me I was so beautiful and that he couldn't believe he had gotten an appointment with me. That's when I realized this man thought I was involved in something inappropriate and that this clinic was something it wasn't. I panicked, but not before he began running his hands all over me and tried pinning me to the massage table. I managed to fight him off, and he exited the room nonchalantly, telling me to have a good day, and that, again, he was so excited for our next appointment. From there, I called the police. I explained what happened. They instructed me to keep his scheduled appointment, and they showed up and arrested him right outside my office door. He was charged and found guilty of inappropriate physical contact. Before his arrest, he had been calling me multiple times each night and breathing heavily into the phone. I was able to get a restraining order. Just as quickly as he entered my life, he was gone. I did find out from the officer working my case that this man owned a nail salon, and police suspected there might be unethical practices happening there involving immigrant workers relying on him for permits. I'm not sure what came of that, but he and his wife still operate their nail salon in a local mall. Story 9. I was either late 12 or had just turned 13. Can't remember, but my birthday is in winter, and that's when this happened. And I was walking to school. The school was about a mile from my house, so it was a decent walk. It was snowy outside, and suddenly a van pulled up in front of me and parked off to the side of the road. I immediately stopped walking because I'm very cautious of strangers. A woman got out of the van and asked if I wanted a ride. Because it was so cold out, I immediately got suspicious because most people who offer a ride just do it from their window while driving by slowly. But this woman parked and got out of her van just to ask me this. It made me feel like she wanted to pull me toward the van. Like I said, I had stopped walking and didn't take another step closer to her or the van. The van had tinted windows, another red flag, I told her. No, I'm fine. Thanks for asking, though. This wasn't enough for her. She asked 2 or 3 more times. The persistence was super suspicious. Eventually, I said, look, this walking is really important to me. I get bullied at school for being overweight and I'm trying to lose weight. That's why I don't take the bus anymore. So I walk to school. I really don't want to ride, okay? I said it really firmly. I didn't actually care about losing weight, but I was chubby and that's all I could think of to say. She finally gave up and left. I still wonder what would have happened if I had been a more trusting kid and gotten that van. Story 10. When I was a teen, I worked at a doctor's office. We had a patient, Charlie, come in. He was a workman's comp case, so he hadn't been a patient before. He was handsome and about 6 feet 5 inches of pure muscle, but there was something just off about him. At first, I thought it was me, but when he left after his first appointment, all the office staff, all female, felt something wasn't right about Charlie. We were all so uncomfortable that we talked to the doctor, male, about it and asked if he could be the one to treat Charlie from start to finish. The doctor also got a bad vibe from him too, so he agreed and told the receptionist to schedule him only during busy times, so there were a lot of people around. Charlie came in for his treatments over the course of 3 months, and other than him just being kind of a strange guy, nothing really happened. He finished his treatments, his lawyer sent some requests for paperwork for WC when he was done, and we all thought that was that. About 2 years later, I was reading the paper, and Charlie was arrested for violently attacking a woman and nearly ending her life in the process. I know it was him because he had an extremely unusual last name, and the ages matched up. He was eventually convicted and went to jail, though I don't know for how long. That was my affirmation that, as a woman, I should always trust my gut. Story 11. I was traveling north for the first time via Greyhound bus. I was 23 and nervous as hell, and as I was walking to the bus stop with my massive backpack on, I saw out of the corner of my eye a group of people leaning on the bus station's exterior walls. One woman had gotten up and started walking toward me. I ignored it because, it's crowded, and I was tunnel visioning my way to my bus stop since I'd never traveled this way before. I was almost to my stop when suddenly I felt the sharpest, most mind-numbing pain in my arm. Turns out this woman came up and with all her might elbowed me directly in the center of my arm as I walked past her. It literally knocked me 3 feet to the right. Out of reflex, I yelped and whipped my head around to her. She was dead still, stopped where she elbowed me, and was looking directly at me. If the gaze this woman had on me wasn't the most intense thing I've ever seen, I don't know what is. She looked ready to explode with rage, and I have never seen someone look at me that way. It made my stomach drop, and I just turned back around and walked even faster to my stop. Somehow her eyes were both lifeless and full of utter hate for me. At the exact same time, I had a bruise that spanned the entirety of my upper bicep, and I couldn't use my arm for basically the entire trip. I never want to be looked at like that again. I knew if I said something or did anything, this woman would do something absolutely unpredictable. Well, more unpredictable than knocking over a 23-year-old lost-looking girl for no reason. Story 12. When I was in college in rural Kentucky, I ended up stranded one weekend in Lexington. My sister had dropped me off at the Greyhound station before heading to the airport. She'd been visiting me from out of state, and I was going to catch the bus back to my small college town. Only problem was that it was Sunday, and the regular bus didn't run that afternoon. This was before smartphones were common, so I couldn't look it up in advance. I walked across the street to the Walmart with my duffel bag and sat in the entryway area, calling different friends trying to find a ride home, all the while feeling near tears, stressed and tired and just wanting to get home. Then a man who was exiting the store stopped and stared at me for a few seconds. Mid-50s, gray hair, trucker cap. He said, "Do you need a ride?" I have never had this experience before or after, but I felt like I had a split-second psychic intuition, and I knew that if I went with that man, I would end up in danger. I just instantly felt it in my bones, like I could see the future. It was terrifying. I said no, and he tried several more times, but finally left. Thankfully, a friend of a friend finally gave me a ride, still during daylight hours, and I made it home safely. Story 13. When I was about 10, I was playing on the playground alone at my school after school hours, with nobody else there on a summer day. The playground was at the left side of the school, and there was a paved road all along from the front of the school to the back of the school on the right side. The back of the school is the way I would go home, through a dirt road surrounded by swamp. It was semi-secluded, but a short walk from home. I was on the playground and went around to the back right side to go my usual way home, and there was a big truck with tinted windows parked there. I tried to move around it, and it moved forward to block me, so I ran to the left side of the school, out of the truck's view, to go the longer way home through the front. The truck had followed me to the front of the school. I went back around, eager to leave my usual way, and the truck was once again moving around to the back. I knew something was terribly off, so I went around near the front again. But when I was behind the building where the truck couldn't see me, I went through a hole in the fence and waded through fields for about an hour before I finally got home. Without being taken, I told my mom about this, and she said the person in the truck probably didn't have any bad intentions. But I just don't believe that for a second. The very long walk home was terrifying. I kept expecting to turn back and see someone following me. Story 14. When I was about 14, my longtime childhood friend and I, both having super strict parents, used to sneak out in the middle of the night during our summer break, just to hang out, walk around town, and generally sneak around feeling daring. One night I went and stood outside her house at the usual time, but she didn't show. I eventually gave up and went to walk back home. About halfway back, a car came down the street toward me. I was on the same side of the road, and some instinct told me to cross to the other side. Just as I decided to do so, the car started slowing down. So I crossed, and it sped up again. As it passed me, the driver turned his face toward me and gave me a penetrating stare that chilled me. As the street was otherwise completely silent and deserted, I could easily hear this car reach the end of the road, then turn and head back my way. Thinking fast, I waited until he'd almost reached me before running back across to the other side of the road. This time, the look he gave me was unmistakably angry. He sped up again, and as I was just passing a smaller side road, I ran down there as fast as I could. I knew there was an alleyway at the other end that I could get home through, and he couldn't drive down that way. Again, I heard the car reach the other end of the road and turn around again. As the sound of the engine approached, I dived behind a parked car. He came down my side road, driving very, very slowly. Peeking out, I caught a glimpse of the driver looking left and right as his car crept along the road. He was clearly looking for me. As soon as the car had turned a corner out of sight, I ran up a nearby gravel driveway that turned out to have a couple of lock-up garages at the other end. By some amazing stroke of luck, I found one was unlocked. I slipped inside and pulled the door to, crawled under a tarpaulin in a dark corner, and just waited. A few minutes later, I heard a car door slam. Then I heard one of the most terrifying sounds I've ever heard. Footsteps on gravel. They came to my end of the driveway and just stood there for a while. I don't even know how he knew I was there. He wouldn't have been able to see me go up there in his rearview mirror, unlike with the side road. But apparently he did. Eventually he seemed to give up, and I heard the footsteps receding back down the drive. Then the car door slam and the engine rev up. I have no clue how long I stayed there under that tarp in the pitch dark with my legs cramping up, but it felt like forever. It was morning by the time I got home. This was almost 30 years ago, but I can still feel those chills. Story 15. A lifetime ago, when we used to hitchhike to the beach, my girlfriend and I got into a limo that stopped to pick us up on Queens Boulevard. It was older and not really great looking, but we didn't think anything of it. We were excited to get a ride in a big comfy car. We were 15. We piled in the back and the dude says, "Hey, where are we going?" We told him Rockaway and he said, "Holy wow, I'm headed there now." To our credit, we both looked at each other like that sounded off. Usually you'd get a ride only halfway, since it's kind of a big right turn off that route. We started noticing that the guy was really unkempt. Then I noticed that the door handles in the back were missing. I was big for my age and had super long hair, almost to my waist, so I looked a lot older than I was. I basically told the guy that if he didn't let us out at the next light, I'd come through the partition and handle things. He tried a whole lot of, "Hey man, just be cool. Let's relax, let's smoke this joint," I told him. Next light, or I start tearing the car apart. He hit a button and the doors unlocked. I pushed Mary out and followed her. The dude had something planned, and it wasn't good. Story 16. I was walking back to work after a doctor's appointment. I was feeling fairly confident, wearing a short skirt and heels. So when a guy honked, I just laughed. He slowed down, but I didn't look at him, and he sped up again. The next bit I was walking through was one way, and I suddenly realized he had gone around the system super fast to honk at me again. I was a bit unnerved, but ignored it. I kept walking, and he kept going around the one-way roads to catch up to me. Finally, as I was crossing the road outside of my building, He pulled into a bus stop and got out of the car. I just ran. Luckily, my workplace was access controlled, so I scanned my ID, ducked in, went to the side to make sure the door closed behind me, and then ran all the way back to my desk. In comparison to some of these experiences, it was tame, but it was terrifying. I was so scared that my friend walked me home after work just in case. I never saw him or his car again. Story 17. It's 2007. I was 26 at the time, and my friend Josh, a former Marine, was a couple years younger than me. We went to St. Louis to catch a Rams game for his birthday, then wandered down to Laclede's Landing to bar hop. In the early morning hours, we ended up at this weird underground bar with fake torches for lights on the wall. It almost had a dungeon feel. There was a guy there who attempted to befriend us. He was overly friendly, we were pretty drunk, and he kept trying to get us to leave the bar and come hang out with him. He was very insistent and became upset when we initially wouldn't go. I just remember having an unnerving feeling the whole time. He had dark eyes and dark hair, and he just creeped me out, which was weird because I was a firefighter at the time and in shape. We acted like we were going to go with him, much to his pleasure, and then disappeared into the crowd, quickly leaving and walking back to our hotel. The entire interaction just felt off. I joked with Josh that one of our friends would have gotten a photo of our heads on a pike that says, "I go home," like in that horror movie, because it really felt like he had bad plans for us. Story 18. When I was 8 and in the 3rd grade, 1994, I was walking to the bus stop. My apartment complex was technically zoned for another school, so it took a few minutes longer. A man who looked just like a certain comedian said, "I hate Mondays, don't you?" I remember he had a yellow Letterman jacket on. I don't know if it was an actual school one or more likely a name brand one. I said yes because he seemed friendly enough, and he just kept walking with me as I headed to the bus stop while saying a few other normal enough sentences. Suddenly, he acted in a highly inappropriate way and said things that no child should ever hear. I firmly said no, and he just replied, "Okay then, have a nice day," and walked away. I was still near my housing complex and didn't know how to react, so I continued to the bus stop like usual. I rode the bus, but as soon as I arrived at school, I went straight to the office in tears. I told the office what happened. My parents were called. The police were called. I showed my parents and the police where it happened in the complex. A couple of other times, my stepdad tried to walk with me to look for the man. I took an alternate route to the bus stop after that, crossing in front of the complex as opposed to through it, one time the only other time. A couple of months later, when I was playing with some friends on that side of the complex, I would never go alone there anymore. I actually saw him drive by. He smiled and waved at me in that same fake friendly manner he used when he first talked to me, as if he hadn't traumatized me. Unfortunately, he was leaving, and all I could tell was that he was obviously coming from the side of the complex where he had walked from the first time, but I didn't see what apartment or anything. I ran and got my stepdad and told him the color of the car, and he went and looked, but nothing. That was the last time I ever saw the guy. But that's definitely the creepiest stranger encounter ever. And I've had a few creepy encounters. I'm lucky he didn't abduct me, especially considering the time period. Story 19. I like to walk, share and run in the forest trails, and one day I decided to go alone. I always go with someone. As soon as I was about to enter the trail, a man who was just arriving in the parking area honked his horn and waved at me. At first I thought, oh, maybe it's someone I know, so I waved back. But then I started walking toward the car and realized I didn't know him, so I turned around and began walking into the forest. He drove off, and I thought that was the end of it. I assumed he was just a friendly stranger, so I kept walking, but within about 2 minutes, he was behind me, then started walking next to me and talking to me. He was thin, had long, unkempt hair, and overall, he just scared me. He had a big tote bag hung from one shoulder and his opposite arm inside the bag. He said, "Yeah, I just came to walk with my cat. She's inside my bag. She loves coming here." At this point, I had stopped walking, and we were just standing on the trail facing each other. The whole time he talked, he kept coming closer and closer to me. I didn't realize how far we'd gone until I noticed I wasn't on the cement trail anymore. I was standing on actual forest grass, really close to the trees. He kept asking if he could walk with me or if I wanted to go with him. That combined with him continuing to close the distance and keeping one arm inside his bag like he was going to pull something out, really began to freak me out. I started getting really anxious and nervous. And I know he could tell. But that didn't stop him. Any normal person would have sensed the discomfort and left me alone. I told him I had to go and started stepping backward toward the entrance of the trail where I had just come from. I decided I wasn't going to keep going and was just going to return to my car. He kept walking toward me as I walked away, saying things like, "Oh, why? Do you have a husband?" Or, "What else do you have to do?" I'm not sure what his intentions were, but I'm convinced that if it hadn't been for the number of bicyclists passing by that day, something very bad could have happened. Story 20. When I was in 3rd grade, I was on a local community service soccer team. Normally, parents would act as the coach and assistant coach, but the parent who normally filled the assistant coach position was sick that day, so the community center sent a random middle-aged woman to act as assistant coach for that game. It also happened to be my best friend at the time's, I'll call her Millie, birthday that day, and she was having a sleepover party after the game. The whole team was invited, so we were all being normal little girls, super excited and talking nonstop about the sleepover at Millie's. About halfway through the game, the assistant coach lady called me over by name, and my instincts instantly knew something was off. My stomach dropped. I went over to her reluctantly and stood a couple of feet away, but she wiggled her finger to motion me closer. She said, "Closer," again, until I leaned in enough. Then she said, "Hey, I just wanted you to know that I'm Millie's mom, so you'll be coming home with me today after the game. As soon as the game is over, come right with me to my car. Don't stop to talk to anyone." I got such bad vibes, so I clung close to Millie for the rest of the game. Then as it ended, I said, "Millie, I'll explain later, but after the game, let's run to your mom's car, okay?" And thankfully, she didn't question me, and we rocketed to her mom's car as soon as the final whistle rang out. I think up until that point, I had retained some hope because I didn't think adults would lie like that. But when we got in the car, a totally different woman turned around, and when I asked, "Wait, are you Millie's mom?" she looked super confused and said, "Oh, yes I am, why?" I explained what happened during the drive home to Millie, and she was super concerned and told me to tell my parents the next day. But when I told my parents, they thought I was making it up and didn't believe me. I was their firstborn, so I think they figured kids just lie about that stuff. I don't really know, to be honest. My grandmother believed me, though, and for that I am thankful, because I felt very scared and alone and confused. I didn't understand why that lady would have tried to take me like that. Story 21. I was 16 years old, roller skating with my friends at the local teen hangout spot, when a mildly attractive young woman approached me and asked for my number. Being a 16-year-old boy, I was like, "Sure, have my number. You're kind of cute." About 20 minutes later, she came back over to me and asked if I wanted to leave and hang out somewhere else. At this point, she told me her brother, some similarly aged guy she was with, would drive us around and then bring me home. I was super weirded out and had a gut feeling that wasn't really her brother, maybe her boyfriend or partner in something sketchy. I told them I already had a ride home from my friends and that I was all set. She got angry and insisted I come with them, that they get me home safe and I had nothing to worry about. My friends overheard this and came over to say, "He's all right. He's got a ride home." To this day, I still get super anxious thinking about how easily 16-year-old hormone-driven me could have just left with a random girl and never seen the light of day again. Story 22. I was walking our dogs mid-morning, around 9:30 to 10 a.m., when a random car pulled up beside me and asked if I was single. I had to pull a headphone out to hear them, and only even stop because any time that's happened before, someone just commented on how cute the dogs are. I told this guy no, I wasn't, and he said, "Oh, okay, well, you have a really nice figure." I didn't even reply, just rolled my eyes, walked away, and put my headphone back in. He drove off. He proceeded to do laps around the park, following us. I tried hiding behind some bushes until he left. I thought he'd finally gone and started walking home when he pulled up behind me again and rolled down his window. I don't even know what he was saying because I just talked over him, repeating, "No, no, no, just leave me alone. Go away, I don't want to talk to you." He drove off again. I got his license plate and decided to call the police. He continued to drive past me at least 4 more times while I was on the phone with the police, and they had to escort me home. I completely avoided that route from then on, but he lived nearby, unfortunately, so I did see him drive by 3 more times in the weeks or months that followed. It made me feel so unsafe in our own neighborhood. Luckily, we moved out of state eventually. My husband has since informed me that he found where the guy lived and worked and would run by the house to keep an eye on him, but he never actually spoke to him. Men, leave us alone. Story 23. I was walking back home along the beachfront after being out with the girls. Around 11 p.m., I think I was about 17 at the time. It was 35 degrees in the middle of August, absolutely boiling, so I was just wearing denim shorts and a barely there top. No part of me felt anxious or worried. I lived in a small, safe country with barely any reported crime. This was around 2008 to 2009, so social media wasn't prolific either. I turned into one of the narrow roads away from the beachfront, and it was pitch black except for some faraway lights from street lamps. I could see the silhouette of a man in the distance getting out of a car and approaching me. I did feel a little nervous, but about 5 seconds later, I could clearly see that it was a police car with blue lights. So I instantly felt relieved. He approached me and asked if I saw 2 men running down the street. I told him no, I hadn't seen anything. He looked around, visibly concerned, and told me the 2 men were accused of a serious crime and that he couldn't possibly allow me to walk home by myself. He then gestured for me to get in his car so he could take me home. At this point, I was just thanking my guardian angel for sending this hero my way to protect me. It was definitely a police car. He had the badge. He wore the uniform. I felt super safe. He asked my name, made some small talk, and pretty soon I had revealed that my dad was away. I didn't have a brother, and I didn't have a boyfriend. People don't ask these questions in an obviously creepy way. It's never, "Hey, little girl, where's your daddy?" It's more like, "I can't believe you're walking home alone. Why doesn't your dad pick you up? Or your brother? Oh, I see, no boyfriend either." Then comes, "You must have a lot of boys after you. Oh, you're only 17? You seem very mature for your age." Then, "You're going to break so many hearts, and you'll turn into a beautiful woman." At this point, I wasn't so comfortable anymore, so I asked him to drop me off a couple of streets away from my house. He stopped the car and just turned his body toward me. He told me, didn't ask, told me, to give him my number because he wanted to message me on weekends and make sure I wasn't walking home alone again. I gave him my number without hesitation because I'd much rather block him afterward than risk a confrontation in that moment. He was casually touching my thigh as he spoke. My face, too, moving my hair behind my ear. Not a lingering touch, but still. The thing is, no part of me thought he was going to assault me or go further. I had no doubt in my mind that he was a police officer. I had no doubt in my mind that this wasn't technically illegal. I just felt like, some men like younger girls, I'm wearing skimpy clothes, I'm being polite. Maybe he thinks I'm interested. It's a bit creepy and I want to go home. But I don't feel in danger, I just feel uncomfortable. And then it took a weird turn. He asked me if I'd ever held a firearm. I obviously hadn't. I'd never seen one in real life and hadn't ever known anyone who had one. He then took his out and told me to hold it. I didn't think he was going to use it. I didn't fear that. But seeing it in a confined space terrified me. I had this intrusive thought that it would go off by accident, and I could just imagine blood splatters all over the car windows. I asked him to please put it away. He insisted that I hold it. This back and forth went on for a few seconds, and finally I gave in. I took the weapon and just held it. My heart was beating out of my chest, and he was looking at me, touching my hair and moving it out of my face. He wasn't saying anything, just watching me. I decided to play along and do whatever would get me out of that car. So I told him to hold the weapon because I thought he'd look really cool with it. Immediately, he took it, held it, and ran it down my thigh. I told him I liked how it felt. Internally, I was panicking, but I kept a straight face. The whole time, I felt like this was somehow my fault. Somewhere along the way, I said the wrong thing. And now here we were. I told him it was almost midnight, and I had a curfew. My mom would get mad if I was late. I tried to open the car door. but it was locked. In a very jokey way, he said, "No, I don't want to let you go. I've only just found you." I replied, "I know, my mom sucks, blah, blah, blah. But I have to go or I'll be grounded and won't be allowed out for a month." He leaned in. I turned my face slightly to the side and he kissed me on the cheek, long and lingering, then kissed my hand a few times. The whole time he was breathing heavily. I kept a shy smile on. He unlocked the car and told me he'd see me tomorrow. I smiled and said, "Yes, of course." I got out of the car, turned the corner, and ran. I don't know if he saw. He texted me almost immediately, "I won't stop thinking about you until I see you again." I blocked and deleted the number. I never told my mom. I never thought to report him. I just had this heavy feeling of guilt in my chest. Like if anyone found out, they'd judge me. It took a good 2 to 3 years for me to look back and realize how wrong it was that I felt guilty. I'd changed my phone by then, but if I still had his number, I would have reported him to every authority imaginable. Story 24. I was about 15 with 2 of my friends, and we snuck out in the middle of the night to meet a boy in a neighboring neighborhood. We lived in the suburbs, so you could very easily just wander down back roads, lined with houses, or go into developments. We were walking on the side of the road, and there were no cars. It was so late. This old car came speeding down and started to slow down, then swerved into the front yard, off the driveway of the house that we were standing next to. He got out of the car, clearly under the influence, and started charging at us. My 2 friends ran, and I was frozen. My other friend came back and grabbed me, and literally pulled me away, and we sprinted to a different neighborhood. Then we hid in the bushes next to the front door of a house, and I kept begging my friends to let me ring the doorbell for help. That car kept slowly creeping back and forth down the road in front of the house we were at, clearly trying to look for us. Story 25. I had a guy I didn't know approach me at a restaurant bar when I was out with a group of friends. Of course, generally that's okay to do. But what he said to me really creeped me out. He looked at me very intensely and said, "I know who you are. I know everything about you. I know the truth." I was really weirded out and felt like he was watching me for the rest of the time I was there. I actually snuck out the side exit because I got such a weird vibe from him and thought he might follow me. Another time I was driving home from visiting my hometown, about an hour away, and apparently I did something to upset a driver on the road. They proceeded to tailgate me, switch lanes when I switched, speed up and slow down, and change lanes to be in sync next to me. It was nighttime, which kind of made it worse. They did this road terrorizing for miles. Finally, I called the highway patrol because I was so scared they might try to hit me, run me off the road, or follow me home. Of course, a mile or 2 after I called HP, the car exited. I felt so relieved. Story 26. It was a sunny Sunday. We slept until around 8 a.m., opened the front door and let the dogs out to sniff around the garden and pee. I made coffee in the kitchen, still in my pajamas, and chatted with my husband. Right when I was pouring the hot water into the French press, we heard our eldest dog barking like crazy. Then we heard the garden gate. It's made of metal, so quite loud if closed with force. And the barking got even louder. I still remember how both my husband and I froze, looked at each other, and then rushed out the front door. I was first and ran into a guy who was about to walk further into the garden and stopped when he saw me. I connected the dots and realized he had planned to go after our dog, who was nowhere to be seen and had obviously fled further into the garden. The guy was dressed in a sweat-soaked tank top, tattoos all over. He had a sledgehammer in one hand, a knife in the other. As soon as my eyes fell on the knife, my brain went blank, and all I could think of was to get this man off our property. So I did the only thing I could think of. I started talking. Somehow, I managed to talk him out of our garden. I can't even remember exactly what I said, but it worked. He told me he had personal issues and that his life was in shambles. Some sad story about his aunt. As soon as he was out of the garden gate and went on his way, my husband called the cops. The man tried to flee, but one of their dogs caught him. We later learned he was under the influence of drugs. Later, we discovered he had already hit our dog at least once with the sledgehammer. That's why our sweet, protective pup had fled. The vet said if he had hit one of our smaller dogs, they wouldn't have survived. But our eldest weighed about 80 pounds and was lucky to be hit only in the fleshy area between the rib cage and hip. My husband told me later he was terrified I might get seriously hurt, or worse, he didn't see any way to intervene without making the guy snap. Throughout that day, I felt disconnected, like I was telling someone else's story. But the next day, it all hit me, and I couldn't stop crying. It took me years to feel safe again at home. And even now, I get a strange feeling whenever I open the front door for the dogs. Story 27. I used to always shop at this one Target years ago, and I started to notice a man who seemed to always be in the store in the same aisles as me every single time. Then I started to see him at other places. I would go. The last trip to Target, I was in the CD section, and he came up next to me talking about CDs, and something in my gut told me to get as far away from him as possible. I left my cart and quickly exited the store. As I fumbled for my keys, yes, I should have had them out beforehand, someone grabbed me from behind and started to drag me across the parking lot. There were two guys at the very front by the store who saw what was happening and started yelling, screaming, and running toward us. The man dropped me and got into his car and sped off. One of the men got the license plate number. What the police later discovered in his car and home still sends me into a panic attack to this day. He had essentially a kit in his car with rope, duct tape, etc. In his home, he had hundreds of pictures of me hung up on his walls, with a cage set up in his basement they suspect was meant for me. The most disturbing part is that he had a picture of me and my mom from one of those Sears portrait studios from when I was around 5 years old, with a note to him on the back from me. Apparently, we had lived in the same apartment complex briefly when I was a child. I was likely a childhood friend, though I don't remember him at all since we moved around a lot. Story 28. I've had several experiences like this for some odd reason. The one that scared me the most was when I was 19. I was still living at home. I went out with my boyfriend and came back home around 3 a.m. We had a wooden fence, so I would have to get out of my car to open the gate and pull into the driveway. For some reason, that particular night, something told me to wait. So I just sat in the car with it running for a few minutes in front of the gate. There was a car parked across the street. No lights on, seemed to be off. After a few minutes, I noticed movement in the car. There was a man staring directly across the street at me. I panicked. This was before cell phones always, so I couldn't call anyone. I continued sitting, trying to decide if I should drive off or not. After a few more minutes, he slowly pulled his car over to mine and stopped right next to me, just staring. I just knew something was wrong. But then he slowly pulled off and went down the street. I waited until I thought he was far enough away, then jumped out of my car, opened the gate, pulled into the driveway. I swear I moved so fast getting into the house. Absolutely terrifying experience. Story 29. I was working at a hotel when a couple came to check in one evening. They were clearly very out of it, super high on something. I got a lot of blank stares and incoherent statements while trying to check them in. It was a little strange for the area, but they had reservations and seemed pretty sedated. I figured if they didn't cause any trouble, I wouldn't make a fuss, and I got them to their room. Cut to a couple nights later, as I was driving home from work, I saw a jogger running toward me along the sidewalk. He bolted into the road frantically, waving his arms, so I stopped and rolled down my window to see what was going on. He walked over, stared at me for a few seconds and said, "Don't I know you?" Yep, it was the guy from the hotel. I immediately knew this encounter was going to be more intense than I anticipated. His clothes were ripped, he was a bit bloodied, looked like he had road rash. He proceeded to tell me a gang was chasing him and he was trying to get away. We were in a quiet college neighborhood. He asked me to pop my trunk open so he could get in and escape. I wasn't comfortable with that, so I told him I'd call the police to help. He responded by reaching into my car and grabbing at stuff, at me, so I panicked and floored it. He latched on to anything he could grab as I sped up, so I swerved and maneuvered until he eventually let go. I saw him roll along the asphalt in my rear view, then spring to his feet and disappear into the night. I got home and called the police, who had already received a few calls about him. I spent the rest of the night disinfecting my car and taking a million showers to clean off all the blood he smeared on me and the interior. Story 30. I female went to a concert last year alone. No biggie, I've done this before. A guy approached me and started making small talk. No big deal. He slowly began getting more comfortable, sat next to me, and after a while asked for a hug. I stupidly agreed. I got up to get in line to enter the venue, and he followed me. I tried to chat with other people and ignore him, then said I needed the restroom, and he tried to accompany me. Luckily, there were lots of people around. After I was done, I hurried back to the line. He got annoyed I didn't wait for him outside the bathroom. He then said he was going to get something to eat, and I felt so relieved since he was giving me the creeps. Alarm bells were ringing. I moved to a different line and didn't see him, so I felt better. Then once inside the venue, he approached me again, and I was at the point where I was absolutely terrified. After the concert, he wanted to say goodbye. I just hurriedly left the venue and bolted for my car. I have never ever met someone that made me feel so scared. It's like when people say, "You've met a psychopath." Yep, this still creeps me out to this day. I was so thankful I was around thousands of people and was never alone with him. Story 31. Years back, a friend and I went into a pub we used to frequent. It was a bit of a locals pub, mostly older men and a few younger guys like us who enjoyed good ale and food. There was a stranger at the bar, which was unusual for that place. It was a small town. Maybe you didn't know everyone, but you'd usually at least seen them before. Once we got to the bar, it was clear he was making the young barmaid uncomfortable. She was a pretty and timid Polish girl, and he was being inappropriate. We told him his behavior wasn't acceptable and asked her if she was okay. She said she was and insisted she didn't want any fuss. Even though we offered to remove him, we sat down with our beers. Less than 10 minutes later, one of the older regulars was shouting at the man, demanding he apologize to the bar staff. The guy got aggressive toward the old man. My friend and I got up just in time to stop him from raising his hand. We dragged him outside and told him not to come back. We returned and apologized for the scene. Despite her earlier insistence, the barmaid was clearly grateful. Several of the regulars even put drinks behind the bar for me and my mate. About 45 minutes later, a regular walked in and mentioned someone standing outside. The barmaid flipped the CCTV to the outside camera, and there he was, just standing there, staring directly into the lens. She was visibly shaken. We offered to go out again and move him on. She said she thought he'd leave soon, but he didn't. After another 5 to 10 minutes, still standing in place, she asked us to intervene. As soon as we stepped outside, he started walking away, yelling something about, "Your souls will be torn apart," or something similar. We stayed until closing to make sure she was safe. When we reviewed the CCTV footage, we saw he had stood outside, staring at the camera for nearly an hour. The barmaid then told us some of the things he'd said to her before we arrived, things that were deeply disturbing. Things like, "I bet you were a beautiful child," and "Your daddy was a lucky man to bounce you on his knee," all laced with undertones that made our skin crawl. If we'd heard that earlier, he wouldn't have just been escorted out. He would have been removed a lot faster and more forcefully. We never saw him again. Story 32. I was out walking my old dog late at night in my 20s. It was NYC, but a pretty safe neighborhood. The thing you need to know is that this was the sweetest and mellowest dog of all time. I used to joke that she was the world's worst guard dog. Despite being about 80 pounds, workers would come into the apartment and she would sleep through it. If she woke up, she'd just lick them a few times and go back to sleep. I never once heard her bark or growl at anything or anyone. Ever. Chillest animal of all time? She was probably about 10 at this point. Well, this one night I was walking her, and a guy was walking toward us down the block. Normal-looking guy, well-dressed, 30s. Nothing outwardly suspicious about him, but my dog's hackles went up. She growled deep in her throat and positioned herself like she was ready to go at him. You better believe I got us across the street and out of there in a hurry. Maybe there's some other explanation, but I still think about it sometimes. She never did anything like that before or after. She had a good long life and passed away at 14. Story 33. I was a kid, about 12 years old at the time. I was traveling with a few family members, my mom, dad, aunt, uncle, and my 2 cousins. They had rented a big van for us to all ride together. We lived in Rhode Island at the time, but we're traveling to Lake George in New York for a vacation. About halfway through the drive, we stopped to get some pizza. It was a totally random pizza place in a completely random town. I don't remember exactly where. I had started to feel queasy from car sickness, and the adults decided we should stop to eat since it was about the halfway point anyway. For extra context, I had never been to Lake George or this particular pizza place before in my life. We got in there and started eating. There was an arcade on the complete opposite side of the restaurant from where we were seated. I decided to head over there with my cousin, who was the same age as me. He wasn't done eating yet, so I said I'd meet him there. I got up and crossed the extremely busy restaurant. It was noisy, and even if I had been talking to someone, no one nearby would have been able to hear anything clearly. As I was entering the arcade area, this little girl, probably 7 or 8 years old, walked straight up to me from the crowd. She looked just like the little girl from the Poltergeist movie. Long, pale blonde hair, blue eyes. She was wearing a light-colored sundress. She stopped right in front of me, looked me dead in the eye, and clearly said, "Hi, my real first name." I stared at her, dumbfounded. I had no idea who she was. She took off right after she said it. I tried to find her afterward to point her out to my family members. None of them believed me except my cousin, but we couldn't find her. It still bugs me how this kid in a completely random town, in a completely random place, somehow knew my name. Story 34. I went on a girls' trip to Orlando, Florida back in 2017. We had taken an Uber from our hotel so we could have a few drinks. We wanted to check out this cool steakhouse that was lit up in neon pink lights. We got in the Uber, and our driver was the nicest man. We had a good conversation on the way to the restaurant. When he dropped us off, he asked if we needed him to hang out for a minute in case we changed our minds. We told him we should be fine, and he could leave. I was confused when he asked if we had any cash. We got inside, and it was a strip club, LOL. The guy at the counter wouldn't let us in because we weren't accompanied by a male. No problem. We didn't want to stay anyway. We waited outside to get another Uber. I can't remember exactly what we were wearing that night, but I know it was during the crop top, Charlotte Russe fashion era, IYKYK. A man approached us asking if we needed a ride, claiming he was a taxi driver. I didn't buy it. He was driving an older Toyota Corolla. He kept asking where we were going and became persistent, insisting he give us a ride. We had all declined at least twice, but he just wouldn't leave us alone. 2 men were walking up to the main entrance and saw what was going on. They stayed with us until our next Uber came. I often wonder what that guy's real intentions were. Trafficking is all I can think of. I'm just thankful those 2 men stayed with us. I never got their names. But if you were at Rachel's Steakhouse in May of 2017, thank you. Story 35. I was shopping with my newborn and noticed a man who happened to be everywhere I was. At checkout, he was in line in front of me, with nothing to buy. When it was his turn, he simply walked out the door. Before leaving the store, I had everything in one hand, so I had a free hand. Luckily, my truck sat really high, and I could see under it as I was walking toward it. I slid my things and baby into the passenger side and locked the door. As I was walking to my side, the man came from around the next car to approach me. I threatened to tase him, and he backed up just enough for me to jump in. Yes, I reported this. At the same store a week later, he followed another woman around the store, to her car, and then to her home. He began stalking her. That store was his hunting ground. He was later arrested, and I found out he had previously been charged with sexual assault. He's out again, by the way. Story 36. When I was about 8 months pregnant, my best friend at the time was performing poetry. I would go support her. This one particular night, she signed up at a venue on the east side, which is a really rough area in my town. I talked with my husband, and we agreed I could go since it was in a populated area. I actually had a great time at the show, until I had to pee. When I came out of the bathroom, there was a scrawny, greasy guy in a tank top waiting for me. As soon as he saw me, he started hitting on me. I was clearly pregnant and wearing a wedding ring. But that didn't stop him. I hurried back to my friends and told them I was extremely uncomfortable and wanted to go home. They had been taking shots and told me, okay, they'd call me tomorrow. I asked if one of them could walk me out, and they pouted and said they just ordered another round and I could make it on my own. Pissed, I turned around, hurried to the door, and paused. I didn't see him. I took off to the car, and within 20 seconds, the guy was on my heels.